Hello class, welcome to 7.2, factor quadratic trinomials with leading coefficient 1. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we do have one objective here, factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c, that is x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, leading coefficient is a term that is given to the number in front of the term that has the highest power. Okay. Now look at each term. We learned about the degrees, right? Yeah. The highest degree, right? Whichever term has the highest degree is the leading term. So here, x power 2, okay, this is the term that has the highest degree. So I'll say leading term is the one with highest degree. And what we notice is the question here is leading coefficient. So what is the number in front of the x squared? There is no number. There is no number, which means this is the number there, right? So the leading coefficient is the number in the leading term. Leading coefficient implies number in the leading term. So the number here in the leading term must be 1. If that is the case, then this is the technique. The following explanation is the technique you will use to factor it. Okay. So you must understand here that previously we had 2 terms, and so we could factor them out, right? When we had 3 terms, if there was a GCF that you could easily find, you could factor them out. If we had 4 terms, then we grouped them 2 by 2 and see if, and picked common factors, and we continued with the problem. Now, in some problems, like the ones we're going to see in this section, you will not be able to find readily a GCF, but you're still required to factor the trinomial, 3 terms. You cannot use the grouping method because you need 2 to group, and you have 3 here. So if you group 2 of them, the third one is left without a partner. So you really have to find a way to factor it, and that way is discussed here. Okay. So if you had x squared plus bx plus c, okay, what we're saying is you want to look for 2 numbers, okay, 2 numbers, any 2 numbers. When I say numbers, I mean positive and negative numbers. Any 2 numbers whose product is the number c and whose sum is the number b, because b and c are numbers, okay? They could be positive or negative numbers. So you need to find 2 numbers which those 2 numbers will have to comply to these 2 conditions, which is that those 2 numbers must multiply to give you c and must add to give you a b, okay, from the problem. Okay. Once you get those 2 numbers, right, let's say those 2 numbers are, say, m and n. If you get those 2 numbers, then we're saying your answer would simply be that m, x plus n, times x plus n, just like that. So that when you FOILed it, when you distributed this, you'll get back your trinomial. That is the trick, okay? It's really, really cool. You just have to find those 2 numbers and insert them into this template, x plus that number, x plus the other number, okay? And that'll be your answer. So this is all in A, B, and C, or rather B and C. So I'm going to show you an example where you can really understand this concept. All right, it says factor x squared plus 7x plus 12. As always, your first step is to see if you can pull out a GCF. Can you find a number that's common to all of them? Clearly you cannot, because the first term, the leading coefficient is 1. Therefore, you will not find a number. And because of the way it is set up, you have x squared x, and then there is no x because the powers are decreasing. And so you don't have any common x either. So typically, this is how your numbers will be, the binomial or the trinomial in this case will be. So you have to use this technique. Okay? So let's understand how this lines up with with x squared plus bx plus c. In the place of b, you have positive 7. In the place of c, you have positive 12. So let's identify that. So your b is 7 and your C is 12. You need to come up with a list of pairs of numbers that will satisfy these two conditions. Okay? There are two conditions, so we'll take them one by one. Okay? So I'm going to create a list here that says factors of C. Okay? Because we are trying to find, let me just recall what we looked at previously. B must be the sum, C must be the product. Okay, so you're finding factors, two numbers that will multiply to give you a 12, right? So your C is 12 here. So what comes to our mind is first the most obvious one, which is 1 and 12, right? 2 and 6, 3 and 4. If I did 4, then I'm going to get 4 and 3. So you don't want to repeat that because they are commutative, right? You don't want to repeat them. Now, are there any other set of numbers that you think will satisfy this? Remember, I said those two numbers could be positive or negative numbers. So for us to get a factor of positive 12, we could have two factors that are negative, right? Negative 1 times negative 12 gives you positive 12. Negative 2 times negative 6 gives you positive 12, and negative 3 times negative 4 also gives you positive 12. So we just did we listed out the numbers for the product. We need to now attach the second condition to it. Among these pairs, which one gives you a sum of 7? So let's add them up. 1 plus 12 is 13, 2 plus 6 is 8, 3 plus 4 is 7. Negative 1, negative 12, we have to add the numbers and take the common sign. So negative 13, negative 8, negative 7. Okay. But we want B, which is positive 7, to come out of these. You can clearly see there's only one pair that does both. Okay, 3, 4 is the only pair that gives you a factor of positive 12 and adds up to give you a 7. So our template is x plus or minus whatever came out plus that number, and x plus the other number. In this case, it is 3 and 4, and that is your answer. Your answer is that you factored it out as two factors, x plus 3 and x plus 4. Okay. That's really great because you had a trinomial that wouldn't work for GCF. So we use this method to help us to find those two factors, and we wrote them out as factors. Okay. So in other words, when I say factor, your final answer must have only factors, only number terms that are being multiplied. You can't have a plus in between here, between the parentheses, right? You just have multiplication. That's how we know we reached the end of it. Okay, let's try this one. Again, this is a good time for you to pause and go ahead and complete the answer to this and check with Mayan. So I have u squared plus 11u plus 24. The variable here is u. It still doesn't matter because we are only focused on the b and the c. The b is 11, positive 11. C is positive 24. Again, let's recall that b is where you add them, the sum, and C is where you take the product. Okay. So we'll build the list. Factors of C, in this case it's 24. So 1 and 24. I always recommend that you do 1, 2, 3 and see if some number doesn't work, of course you'll skip it. So let's say 2, does 2 have another one? Yes, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4, 4 and 6. Do we have a 5? There's no 5, so skip it and go to the next one, 6. So 6 will give back a 4, so you know you kind of reach there. And try and see if you covered all the big numbers too. We did. So we have now to list all the negative options as well. It's going to be both negative because you get a positive product. And then let's add them for the second condition to satisfy. It's 25, 14, 11, 10. You saw 11, so you might be tempted to stop right there. It's always good to go back and list everything out. Again, eventually you'll get the hang of this and you'll know for sure that is what you have. And you can actually think of this in your head too. You know, you don't have to do the listing, but that will happen eventually. when you've done enough problems to master this topic. Negative 20, I'm sorry, 14, not 24. I think I multiplied it. Negative 11, negative 10. Okay. Again, among all these, we need product and sum of 11. So that's going to be our two numbers. It doesn't matter which number comes first if you did 8 or 3 because they're being multiplied. So the answer is x plus 3 and x plus 8. Okay. Well, we found the two numbers, but something is wrong here. Can you think about what is wrong here? Okay. Yes, the variable is incorrect. The variable in the problem given is u, but what I have here is x. I wrote this intentionally because I see a lot of students very used to the x, and so they bring in the x everywhere. Please understand that when you enter these answers, either in your exam or in your assignments, online homework assignments, it will mark you wrong. And you may be wondering, I did get the 3 and the 8 correct. Why does it mark me wrong? It's marking you wrong for your variable, not for your numbers. Okay? So please match the variable as in the problem. For your own understanding, you might have an x, but you always want to reflect the same variable as used in the problem. Box your hands. Okay, here we have the variable t. Let's bear that in mind. Okay, now the b is the middle term, right? B is a negative 11 and C is 28. Until we get used to this, we're going to write the sum and the product. Factors of C here is 28. Okay. I have 1 and 28, 2 and 14. Again, use your calculator, okay? So do 28 divided by 2, and you can see that it's going to be 14. Do we have a 3? Again, try and divide this out and see. Oops, divide and see if that gives you the desired one. So this is how we will list it out for larger numbers too, okay? 3 does not have 1, so let me just erase that. Then go for 4. Do we have a 4? Yes, we have 7 for the 4, and so on, okay? So you can use your calculator for larger numbers. This was not a large number, but I'm just saying, you know, for larger numbers or numbers that you're not quite sure, you can always use that, okay? And then negative options as well. Negative 1, I'm sorry, negative 2, negative 14, negative 4, negative 7. Let's add them up. 29, 16, 7 plus 4 is 11, negative 29, negative 16, negative 11. Now, if you look at your sum, your B is negative 11. So if you did not list out the negative options, we will never find that pair, right? So you have the pair in the negative side. Negative 4, negative 7 will add up to give you negative 11, but they do multiply to give you a positive 28. So the variable here is t. So I say t, usually it's t plus a number, t plus the other number. But because we didn't get a positive number, we got the two numbers are negative, it's going to be simply t minus 4 and t minus 7. Okay. We have a minus in the answer for the first time. So let me also show you how to check if this is right. And after I check it, I'm going to box it. So check if you got the numbers right. If you were to multiply two binomials, because when you broke up your trinomial, you got two factors that were binomials. So you're going to do FOIL method to multiply it out to see if the answer was, it takes you back to the question, okay? The result of this must match with your question. So t times t squared, t times negative 7 minus t, negative 4 times t minus 4t, negative 4 times negative 7, positive 28. You have like terms here. T squared minus 7 plus 4 is 11. So common sign, t plus 28. This is good because this mirrors your original question. So you know you did your factoring correctly. So you can always check your answers by foiling it so that you can see if it gives back your trinomial. And then you come back and box our answer. That way you can be absolutely certain of your answers. Okay. We look at our last question. This is using the variable z. My b is +4 and c is -5. Okay. Well, c is -5. So remember, you're going to list factors that give you a -5. So this is our sum. This is our product. Factors of -5. C, which is -5. So we know 1 and 5 will work, but you want a -5, right? So you'd want one of them to be negative. So -1 and 5 will multiply to give you a -5. Is there anything else that you can list? Well, remember, 5 is a prime number, so you're not going to find anything else to work for your other pairs of factors. Once you're done with this, then you will now consider other signs. So if I could either have a negative for the 1 or a negative for the 5. So I have a 1 and a -5 as the other option. Okay. Because it was prime, we really didn't have much to do. Okay. -1 plus 5 is +4. 1 plus a -5 is -4. Out of these two, you want the one with +4. That becomes your option. And then you have z is our variable. So z -1 and z plus 5. Okay. Again, perform the check. Foil it. Z squared plus 5z minus 1 times z is -z. Or you could put 1z, no problem. -1 times +5 is -5. These two are like terms. So z squared plus 4z minus 5. Which is good because it matches with the original question. Come back and box your answer. I hope you enjoyed this section. I will see you in the next one.